name is Bear Siragusa, and you are listening to the Hunting Hound podcast presented by W Hunting Supply. All right. I'm sitting here with Bob Ford. I really appreciate you coming back on, Mr. Ford.
Good to see you.
Likewise. Since the last time we talked, you've had at least one, possibly two, books come out. You had the cookbook come out not that long ago. Tell me a little bit about that one.
The cookbook was all rabbit recipes because I got tired of eating fried rabbit all the time. When I would go to, wild game suppers, that was the one way that they served it. So, I, over the years, found lots of ways to eat rabbits.
Right.
So I threw 20 of them together in a book and introduced each one of them with a little bit of a humor, know, that was, that's a very seasonal sort of selling book. I sell them during rabbit season, right after rabbit season. And I sell them at wild game fundraisers where I might be invited as a guest speaker and I'll sell books there. But, It doesn't move as many as the other books, but yeah, it's there. And then after that one, I don't know if I was here since Bramble Rambles would have been the next book out. And that is all faith-based. Just, my day job is as a pastor. And, that book is all, things that I think about while I'm out training dogs during the year, or maybe while I'm rabbit hunting, but I run dogs year round. And just, little essays that deal with, thoughts of faith and, maybe questions that we all have. And then that would have been after the cookbook. And then here it's out now. I got some copies ordered. I should have them here in a couple of weeks. I have a follow-up to that called Bramble Rambles Christmas, which my publisher shortened to Brambleness. And it's a similar idea, but it's all Advent, it's all Christmas and Epiphany and, childhood memories of, maybe things that aren't as common to, everyone in the country. I, talk about the bell snickle in there, which I thought every kid knew about bell snickle growing up, and a lot of people didn't, Santa's a good cop, bell snickle's a bad cop. And then here in the last few years, I had a buddy of mine say, yeah, people know about bell snickle now because of that TV show, The Office, which I never saw The Office. But
no.
Then again, I don't get Dilbert comic strips either, so I'm not a real good guy about living in the cubicles. But. So that's the last book out. So that book's just now coming out.
Okay. Gotcha. Well, cool. I guess let's start with the first one. Let's start with the cookbook. Are those all recipes that you've had all of these years, or did you have people contributing recipes to the book, or was it just kind of the accumulated knowledge over a lifetime of beagling?
Just stuff that I found that works for me over the years. And I didn't put fried rabbit in there, which I thought I should have because everybody does it. I thought, I won't do that. But I have enough recipes for another probably collection of 20, but I've just been too lazy to assemble that book.
Well, I mean, it's been a year since we've talked, and you've had 3 books come out, so that doesn't sound lazy to me. I've been on this earth for almost 40 years, and I've had exactly 0 books come out. So,
oh well, writing recipes is the most boring thing in the world. I can't stand it, and it's. I remember one of the editors I was assigned I had to go back and change the recipes because I would use such technical terms as a heavy dusting of black pepper. And I had to define what that meant. And I'm like, hell, I don't know what that means. So I had to go back and measure some of these things out. Okay, how much is a heavy dusting and stuff like this?
Right, exactly. I totally get that. I tend to cook sort of, shooting from the hip a little bit, and I'll cook after taste, which means that none of my meals end up tasting exactly like they did the last time. And it drives my mother-in-law, poor gal's just crazy, because she wants the recipes and I want to give them to her. And I try, but it doesn't end up being the same because I'm not there to sort of taste, test, and adjust as it goes.
Right.
So I feel a little bad about that, but yeah, I'm the same. It's like a dash, there's a saying in Norwegian, "Sånn passe," which means it translates to about, the right amount. Like how much pepper should I have? The right amount. It's like, so I totally get that. Are those recipes that you can use, are they specific to cottontail, or do they work pretty well for some of the bigger, like swamp rabbits, hares, things like that?
They work for anything. You could probably substitute some of the recipes, use ground meat. You could probably use anything for those, I originally developed the bratwurst that's in there for snowshoe hare because they can be a little gamier. But yeah, they can. One is a Scotch egg recipe that I came up with. Of course, Scotch eggs are soft boiled egg covered in sausage and then fried. Mm-hmm. And usually it's a pork sausage when people make it. And at one point, and we still get milk delivered every week. We still get milk delivered. And
that's cool.
We cut off the dozen eggs. We're getting a dozen eggs a week. And I'm like, we're not keeping up with these. And so I thought, well, how am I good? So instead of Scotch eggs, I had hopscotch eggs. And the hop meaning rabbit. And I ground the rabbit meat up. Of course, rabbit's very lean. So to make it stick to the egg, I had to add egg. So I think it was like, to make 4 or 5 Scotch eggs, I could use up a dozen eggs that were sitting in the fridge.
Really? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I'm looking forward. I really want to try that recipe, and I really want to try the bratwurst recipe. I can travel south and get into some like the sort of European equivalent of cottontails. They may actually be just cottontails. I'm not sure. And then we can get into something that they call the southern rabbit, which is like a bigger German wild rabbit that's migrated up here. But what I've got around me and just like flocks is the European mountain hare.
Okay.
Which are like this, they look exactly like snowshoes to my eyes. It was years before I even knew that they weren't snowshoes. And I've not ever really hunted them specifically, but now I've got the beagle I've got, I started him on roe deer, and he's done great with that, but our roe deer population collapsed completely here. Not in Norway, but just in my area. We have a bunch of lynx that have moved in, and they've wiped out our roe deer population. That, coupled with a very, very long and very bad winter and a very bad summer, means that I can't buy a roe deer right now. But hare I've got a bunch of, so he's transitioned to hare now. So I'm really excited to try. I'm really excited to try some of those recipes because, there's plenty of hare around here.
Nice.
But you've done some hare hunting as well with your guys. Like how far away do you need to go to get into hare country?
To run them regularly, I only have to go, an hour. Okay. Where I grew up as a kid in Pennsylvania, I was at the southern edge of snowshoe hare territory, And when I was a kid, when it wasn't the quiet season, back then in Pennsylvania, you couldn't train dogs of any kind in the summer for a couple of months there. But I could walk up the hill behind my house with my dogs on a leash, and I could get into enough hare to, more often than not, get a chase. And back then, it was a 1 week season. After Christmas, it was always the day after Christmas. The season started December 26th. Mm-hmm. And it was a week-long season, not counting Sundays. You were allowed 2 hare per day. Now in Pennsylvania, you're only allowed 1 per day for that 1 week period. And it's on the table with the Game Commission. They want to discuss maybe what to do with the snowshoe hare population. Of course, they also want to reintroduce. No, it's actually the opposite. It's, anymore you get entire hare seasons from Pennsylvania where there's no snow on the ground. So you got snow white hare squatted thinking they're invisible. They've reintroduced the fisher into their territory. Now they're talking about reintroducing the pine marten to the same territory.
Did these people get bitten as a child by a rabbit? Like, what's their problem? Like, that seems malicious intent. No, almost.
I think there's a mindset with some wildlife biologists and maybe our Game Commission that we need these historic sort of apex predators that used to once exist and are no longer here. And so, I don't know. I mean, that's a good question. And, of course, a lot of people are opposed to both the fisher, which is already reintroduced, and now potentially the pine marten. But so I grew up running. In fact, when I was a kid, there were places Dad and I would hunt cottontails that were farms or adjacent to farms where you had to be careful in the early cottontail season to make sure you weren't shooting a snowshoe hare because it hadn't changed colors yet.
Okay.
And so you had to be careful because it was still brown and we'd have to be careful. But I don't shoot too many hare in Pennsylvania anymore. I go to New York, Maine. I've been to New Hampshire, Vermont.
Gotcha. Wow, that's interesting. I'm sorry to hear that that's happening. The reintroduction of some of the apex predators, or even not even the apex predators, just predators.
They're not
in
even
general,
really, yeah.
That's an unfortunate thing, especially when you've got, I can see it in places where, where they've got, like, for example, white-tailed deer populations that are so high, in some of these urban areas, like not actively removing coyotes and things like that. I could see the argument, possibly, not really, but I would be able to understand that more. But, from we don't have fishers here, but we've got the pine marten, and they're fun to run. I mean, I run them with my hounds, and they're one of the few game species here that tree. Lynx will occasionally do it, but the bear don't do it, and the fox don't do it. So it's kind of fun, when they tree, I know they most likely have a pine marten. But there's not so many of them, and they've never been out eradicated here. So it's like, it makes sense that they're here. I would be hesitant to, get on board with them reintroducing,
And of course, the coyote has been tough enough. The coyote's been tough enough here. It's classified. They call it the eastern coyote. And, I remember the Game Commission had, they give you a rule book for every year you get your hunting license, anything that changed in terms of, what you're allowed to hunt with and in terms of weapons and seasons. And they had a big center, bold article one year about the coyote, and the percentage of wolf DNA. So what happened
Right.
here was the coyotes migrated back east around the Great Lakes. They interbred with the, wolves. And so, there's a certain, our coyotes are bigger, faster, stronger.
Yep. 40. I read that article, 40% bigger than the coyotes you find to the west of the Mississippi.
Yeah.
Yep. That was interesting. I grew up in Maine, and I was kind of there when the coyotes started to really come back in force, and sort of that tail end of that transition from coyote to, bush wolf, basically. I mean, they're where you got those big packs, and they were crazy. They came chasing dogs right into the yard. They're an interesting animal. We don't have them over here, but one of the things we do have over here that looks identical to me, like it's so hard for me to see the difference, is golden jackals. And they're just starting to make it over into Norway, and they were not seen outside of Africa until 10 years ago. And in the last 10 years, they've made it all the way from Africa to northern Norway, which is apparently the biggest habitat expansion by a land mammal that has ever been documented.
Yeah, that's not at all similar climate.
No, it's not. And that they were able to adjust is just, testament to canine's ability to adjust, I suppose. But yeah, no, that's too bad. I'm sorry to hear that they're doing that. Are you seeing any effects of that in the areas where they have released the fishers? Is that making it a little bit more difficult to get a run going or anything like that with the beagles?
Yeah, I think there are, and I see them at our beagle clubs. A lot of places around here have clubs where we maintain grounds for rabbits, and it's I can't say fisher per se, because anytime you maintain an artificially high population of rabbits, every predator comes.
Right.
It's like your Chick-fil-A on Saturday at lunchtime, and in comes the traffic, and we get all the predators in bigger numbers. But that's where I first saw a fisher, was leaving the Beagle Club at night, and you saw something real dark and shadowy crossing the road in front of you like a giant weasel.
Right.
That's the first time I saw one. But I think there are places, and I worry in particular where they put them up in the Allegheny National Forest where the snowshoe hare are. You see video of these things running down a squirrel in a tree or something. And and I sometimes wonder if that's not also, part of the problem with the rough grouse, which I know they like to say could be some mosquito-borne disease or maybe West Nile or something. But I mean, a grouse sleeping in a limb at night, might be a pretty easy meal for a fisher.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they think that is, we have historic low populations of the ptarmigan here. And they think that is because of they've done some research and set up some cameras at nests and things like that, and have found that martins and the pine martin and the fox are two of the bigger contributors to the collapse in the population. I mean, certainly overhunting to a degree, but it was that was not as big of a problem until suddenly, you got both of the things happening at the same time, the overhunting and then the fox. And now the population is so low that even though like they canceled the hunt, they canceled the season this year for ptarmigan in this area, and it hasn't helped.
Yeah.
They're so low and there's so many fox because nobody's hunting fox anymore. I'm the only guy, there's a couple of guys that do it over bait, but I'm the only guy in this particular area that runs them with hounds. And it used to be that everybody did that. It was part of what they did. If you saw one moose hunting, you shot it. Like it was everybody was farmers and nobody wanted them around. And not necessarily better, it's not necessarily better, but at the same time, it's, there's an imbalance that we've created ourselves.
Right.
But I'm skeptical that
the
solution is to bring in more.
Yeah. And I'm not a biologist and I've never even played one on TV. But I can't think that if you want a whole diverse group of predators, you also got to think, do we still have the habitat that used to exist when all those native indigenous predators were here? Or do we have way too many highways, way too many shopping malls, way too many parking lots to really, reproduce the type of, territory and habitat that once supported all the predators and all the prey? Do we still have that?
Right. That's a good question. No, I don't know the answer. Well, we kind of went down a rabbit hole there. Sorry about that. That tends to happen on this podcast.
Or a predator hole, yeah.
A predator hole, that's right. That's right. So how, I remember one of the things I appreciated about talking to you the last time, and I appreciate about fall, is that you're more or less able to trace your pack back to some of the original dogs, and you don't have 15, 20 dogs going through your place every year. You've got a set group that you work with from, dawn until dusk in a sort of cosmic sense.
Yeah.
How are everybody doing now? How's your pack?
I'm down to 5. I lost Duke here a few months ago. He was 13.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Sorry to hear.
Yep. Everybody else is doing well. And, I got, one other older dog and, otherwise I got, some youth. So
good.
I'm doing well.
Who's your youngest dog at this point?
Stormy.
Okay.
Yep.
And how old is she? He?
2. She's 2.
Cool. Is she out of your stuff or is she, brought in from somewhere else?
She's out of my Blitz dog as well as my buddy Jason's dog Jenny Lee.
Okay.
Is the father or is the dam is Jenny.
Okay. Cool. Do you one of the questions I wanted to ask you was maybe it's like you said, there's not as much snow as there used to be in Pennsylvania, but we're at a point here where we got an unseasonably early or unusually early snowfall that's stuck. So we got about 3 feet of snow that compacted to about 2 and a little bit feet of snow, but enough. It didn't get real hard. So I think I sent you a picture of the Beagle up over his head in snow. Yeah. Do you have, how do you deal with that with snow conditions when they get that deep? Are you out at all then, or are you kind of backing off a little bit?
Yeah, I've been out in that, and what tends to, a deep powder like that is tougher, or a slush. Was that a slush or a powder you were on there that day?
A powder. Yeah, that was yesterday. It was powder. Yep.
Yeah. And that's tough. Of course I, will wear snowshoes. And then I've always had for the last 20 years anyway, one dog that has learned to use their eyes while chasing. Mm-hmm. And you would think every dog would learn that, but if a rabbit is leaving tracks in the snow, there's no way it's getting away. And, and it was probably Rebel was the first one to do this. And this, would have been 2000 or, maybe early 2000s. And, my wife and I went up to where she's from. And, upstate New York, right on the Quebec-Vermont border.
Mm-hmm.
And I see the dog coming through. You know, this old farmer has us in. She grew up knowing this farmer. And, you know, we asked him where. And he says, oh, you know, everybody up there has that North Country accent, you know. And he says, oh, you go back in there into Cedars and you'll find so many rabbits you won't know what to do, you know.
Yeah.
So we go in. And all of a sudden, I see Rebel just looking for footprints. And he would get a Hare going. And I mean, they couldn't lose him. And it's been the same way with his son Duke, and now with Diamond, which is a daughter out of that litter. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I got so many Hare when I was up there that time with just one dog, because we were up there after Christmas to visit my in-laws. I had one dog in a hotel, mm-hmm. so I couldn't take the whole pack. You know, I boarded everything else, and we went up. Mm-hmm. And I remember on the third day I was there, fourth day, he says, oh, you're getting many today? I said, yeah, I got my limit today. He said, I think it was 5 or 6.
Wow.
He says, wow. I said, once you cross that railroad bed, they're everywhere. And he goes, what railroad bed? I said, oh, it's in there maybe a mile. You walked that far on the snowshoes, did you? I said, yeah. And he looks at me and says, you were in Quebec, no big deal before September 11th.
Gotcha.
But that dog would look at footprints and, you know, I mean, it was just uncanny. And that Duke dog of mine would do the same thing on wet snow on Cape Cod. He did the same thing with his eyes wet sand. Wet sand on the beach.
Really? Wow.
And them footprints are tiny. And I'm there with Jason, who owns the bitch that, you know, my Stormy dog's out of. Mm-hmm. And I can hear him yelling something down there on the beach. But it's tough to understand Jason anyway, because he has a Boston accent. Mm-hmm. And I can only hear Duke running. And then up comes a rabbit, and I shoot it. And Jason comes up, and he says, that dog was running on wet sand, using his eyes, look for the footprints, stick his nose in it, bark, pick his head up, look for the next footprints.
That's awesome. Wow.
And then, you know, he said, I'm going to breed to that dog. And I said, he only has a couple of wins, and they were small classes. He's not a field champion or anything. He said, yeah, but he said he doesn't lose rabbits. So I love powder. I love powder to hunt snowshoe or cottontails on, because I got that advantage. And, you know, sometimes if it gets to be a real bitter morning, sometimes my dogs will struggle if there's no fresh powder. But typically when we do get a lot of snow, it becomes compacted ice. And then if I get that fresh powder, 1/2 inch, I'm good.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, I'm hoping that happens here. We're actually supposed to get a warm day here next week. We're not real warm, you know, mid-30s, but I'm hoping it'll be enough to just compact it a little bit more so that it carries them a little bit better. Because what happens here is if I drop him down in the forest, in the pine forests, that seems to carry him a little bit better, and there's a little bit less snow. But then as soon as he lifts a Hare, it runs straight up the mountain. And it gets just way up there where, I mean, I don't know if you saw the pictures from yesterday, but I mean, that's about as big as the trees are going to get up there, where, you know, we're getting up towards the tree line. And, you know, by mid-January, then the wind will have been howling enough to kind of compact and make it carry a little bit better. But at this point where it's just kind of fallen and just laid there. The
dog's just sinking down over his head, you know.
Exactly, yeah. So he's doing great with it, but I'm a little bit concerned about, you know, he's still a youngster. He's only year and a half. So I kind of don't want to let him just go completely insane, you know, like.
Right.
I think it's with a dog with that much drive, especially a youngster, I think it's real easy to push them a little bit too hard, let them go farther than they should. So trying to be a little careful with him, which is hard because he it's a little bit too much fun to hunt with him.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, of course, it's all different now. I mean, when I was a kid hunting hare with my dad, I don't think I really knew how far a hare ran because I didn't have GPS. You just walked in the woods, and to make sure you did well, you made sure you had a dog that wouldn't lose the rabbit, and they would short circle, like a cottontail, and you could hear it the whole time, and then it'd go out big.
Yeah.
And then you just waited for it to come back. And, I had no idea that those circles were over 1,000 yards out or 1,500 yards out when I was a kid. I had no idea until I owned GPS.
Right. Right. I mean, it's amazing. They try to shake them off real quick, and then it's like that one strike and you're done. Then if you don't get it, then it's going way out. Yeah.
And I imagine probably those hare run bigger circles even, or comparable?
I don't have anything to compare it to. I haven't hunted the snowshoes in the States, so I'm not 100% sure, but based on what you're describing, it's pretty comparable. They'll do some intelligent stuff. Once you get up onto the mountains, then they'll run roads and just put on a burst of speed and just try and dust the dog. But if you're hunting down in the valley bottoms like I am, they'll cross roads, but they won't touch them otherwise. They'll just point their nose upwards and run straight up the mountain. And then the funny thing is that they'll get up somewhere high, and I mean, you can see them from, with binoculars from way, way off, and they'll sit there and they'll just kind of keep track of, is that dog getting any closer? And they'll, they're not afraid of the dog in any way, which is really, really interesting. They'll stay out and ahead of it, but they won't, they're not doing any more work than they absolutely have to.
Right.
Which is pretty interesting.
I mean, I think that, I've seen rabbits, cottontails get out far ahead and stand there and lick their feet while the dogs are coming up behind them. And I don't know if that is supposed to make scent not as good or whatever, but, I often, wonder if these things are thinking, of all the things that are trying to eat me, why is this thing so dumb that it's making this much noise?
Right, exactly. Exactly.
Looking back at the dogs.
Gets them feeling a little cocky. Yep.
Yeah, they're like, oh, this thing's letting me know exactly where it is. I ain't worried about that dog.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's, another thing I wonder a little bit about sometimes is, there's definitely beagles over here, but there's not a ton of them. I think last year there was 360 pups registered in the Norwegian Kennel Club.
Okay.
For the entire country.
And would those be from hunting bloodlines, or would they be show dog bloodlines, or would they be hunting ones?
They ideally would be both.
Okay.
Is what the beagle ideal is here.
Yeah.
It's, it's definitely, it's not as common that you'll find the one or the other here anymore. It's like in the States, you could find the hunting lines and the show lines, and never shall the two meet. But here you have to go through this whole process, and a lot of breeders require it. And the one I got Mike from didn't, thankfully, but he would really like me to do it now because Mike's turning out to be, the beagle I've got is turning out to be pretty good. You've got to go to a bench show, and you have to get, what's called very good, or good, I guess, which is, it's not that hard to do. If the dog has 3 legs and a tail, you're pretty good.
You're certified.
Right. But then you have to do that before you can then go and do any hunting trials. And the trials are not competing against other dogs, but they're competing with a total number of points that you then subtract from how the dog performs. And the goal being to get something called like the hunting champion certification. And a lot of people will do that. So a lot of the beagles that are being born are from parents that are hunting champions. But the weakness to that system is that because you're not competing with other dogs, you're not necessarily, not all hunting champions are created equal.
Right.
So, I've hunted over, multiple hunting champions that I was very glad I was not interested in buying.
Right.
Because I would have had to have said no.
Yeah.
But so a lot of them are hunting. A lot of the beagles that are bred are being bred by breeders more than hunters breeding their beagles. It's breeders breeding hunting dogs more than hunters breeding beagles.
But there's a relatively new title here that is popular in the show dog conformation community, and they can earn a master hunter title if they can actually bark on a rabbit. Yeah. I mean, we're not talking circling rabbits. We're not talking anything like that. But it's I always say that within the show dog community, the more letters they can put before and after a dog's name for titles that they can accumulate, the happier they get. And so, there are people who want to bring back the ideal show dog, field dog combined. But I guess the last one to earn dual actual titles, wasn't that pretty of a dog in the ring and maybe not that great in the field. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah. That makes sense. I wish there were more beagles here because they're great. I'm preaching the choir here, but they're such great dogs. I think what's kept them from being as popular has been the Nordic breeds of hound are mostly bred for hare. So you've got like the Norwegian Dunker hound and the Hegan hound, the Hamilton hound, the Halden hound. They're all bred for hare for the very, very most part. And, they're a bigger dog, a little bit, able to move a little bit faster in some of the deeper snow, that kind of stuff. Right. Yeah. So the beagles haven't eclipsed them in popularity for hunters, which is a little bit too bad because the beagles, they bring a sort of cheery hardiness to the game that it can be hard to find in the other some of the other breeds over here. And it's one of the reasons I chose beagles.
If I go to more northern places here up towards Canada, I guess at least in AKC world, the standard says a beagle can be no taller than 15 inches at the shoulder. I get up there, I see beagles that are easily 16, 17. I've seen 18-inch hounds up there. Right. And I know people that want to say, oh, they can't do that. The breed standard this, the breed standard that. And I'm like, but we ain't running on 3 foot of snow down here in Pennsylvania. Right.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's true. And I've seen that here too, that the beagles are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Like this Mike dog, one of the reasons I went for him is because both his mom, his grandmother, I knew all of his relatives. They were a client at the hospital the veterinary hospital that I work at. Guy is an active hunter, out all the time. And I knew that I was going to get something that I could work with from this guy. But one of the things was that it was actually a beagle. Uh-huh. It was, he's 13 inches at the shoulder, he's a little guy. And, looks like a beagle. And then some of these some of these beagles that we're getting into work are, I'm not talking about like the engorged, tick, obese beagles. I'm talking about lean, mean beagles that are, pushing 40, 50 pounds.
Right.
And are so tall. And I mean, at that point, I feel like you're kind of getting back into that traditional Harrier.
Yeah.
Where, there was a breed for that. If you wanted a bigger beagle, you got a Harrier.
Yeah.
Back in the day. But they're not looking at it as individual breeds. They're Mike, who is half the size of some of the other dogs. There's a dog named Bill at work that is, easily 40 pounds. And like you said, 17, probably 18 at the shoulder, big, thick joints, huge feet, great big head. If you took his head and put it onto a walker, it wouldn't look out of place,
Yeah.
And, great looking dog for whatever he is. But in my head, it's not really a beagle. And I think that's a little bit scary when you start to get into, not just the show beagle versus the hunting beagle, but where you get into where both things can be bred as beagles. You kind of get into this territory where you have no idea what you're going to get. Which is a little, I don't know. That's I'll get off my soapbox. It's how I feel about the whole thing. But yeah, and I want to talk to you about the Bramble Rambles, because your past books have been, the Beagle Tales books have been about beagles with comments on. There's been this thread of faith throughout all of the books, and it sounds like this is a faith book with a thread of beagles.
Yeah. The only role the beagles had was they were barking and chasing while I was thinking about what I was writing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I called them, Bramble Rambles. They're rambles in the sense that they're not, out and out academic. Or even purely homiletic type of writing. they kind of ramble, and they're brambles because I'm in the brambles with the dogs while I'm thinking about these things.
Right.
And so yeah, the first one is all over the place. It questions suffering and God's creation and, the word of God and what that means and some things like that. And this one of Christmas stories is, it kind of focuses on Advent, Christmas, and Epiphany. Mm-hmm. They're all things that I threw up on Facebook at some point because I think it's such a negative place that I'll go on there once a day, try to write something positive and get off of it.
Yeah, I always like reading your stuff. My reaction to Facebook has been to post dad jokes and beagle pictures.
Yeah, they're pretty good. I like those.
That's good. But I love, I always check in on your pages because it's just like, it's something positive in an otherwise fairly, Facebook can be a little bit of a cesspool.
Oh yeah. I don't need to, get bogged down into some thread of people, being quite angry at each other over 308 versus 30-06 and 20 gauge versus 28 gauge and getting all upset and bitter. It's like, I don't need this in my life. But,
right.
So so these things all appeared as posts that. I think a lot of people, and I had to ask what it meant. Somebody once commented, TLTR, too long to read. And I thought, good, that gets the lazy thinkers from reading it.
Right, exactly. It's like, you were not my target audience, and thank you for exposing yourself, right?
Yeah. I didn't want you to read it anyway. And
right, exactly.
And so and then I tell little sort of anecdotes, and some of those, I was talking about waiting, and one of the essays in this most recent book, and I talked about how when I was a kid, if you were going to get a snow day, now they send a text message to your parents. It's across the TV set scrolling, and they might call your house. When I was a kid, you had to get up, see it snowing, just hammering, and turn on FM radio and sit there just hoping they would call your school, Yeah. So I kind of, talk about that hope of a snow day as a kid, and sort of that to the hope of Advent for the first people to see Christ and that sort of a thing. So that just, that kind of a mix of stories,
Sure. And I mean, most people listening to this now know who you are and know what you do. But you've been very honest about that. A lot of your sermons have been written while listening to Beagles.
Yeah, I do the more academic stuff at home. Mm-hmm. So I try to translate the passage at home. If it's New Testament from the Greek, Old Testament from the Hebrew. I haven't kept up with those languages like I should since seminary, but if I get some lexicons and some aids and some cheats, I can do that, and then I'll read some commentaries from the big brains. And that's my process. And then, let's say I do that by Monday, Tuesday, put some hours in it, and I get points A, B, C that I want to talk about in this passage. Then I go out, and when I'm running dogs, I think of stories or illustrations that reinforce point A and point B and point C. And I just kind of, let my mind think of things or stories or something that would kind of go along with those points. I'll just zone out thinking while the dogs are chasing, and I do it all year. And sometimes in hunting season, the rabbit gets by me because I'm thinking, and I just, I forgot I was hunting.
Sure. All right. Yeah. I mean, but Hare, hunting rabbits and hunting with dogs in general takes an enormous amount of patience. Mm-hmm. And, you're going to be, a lot's going to happen very quickly, but spaced out, over probably some hours of just kind of not boredom exactly, but at least, definitely time to just think.
Yes.
And do you have like a notebook out with you? Are you writing this down as you're kind of coming up with it and writing footnotes kind of as you go?
Yep. I have a little notebook that I carry, and sometimes I'll take a little Bible with me too, and they're in Ziploc bags and a pocket or in my game vest in case it would rain or, get a wet snow. And, in the non-hunting season, I have a lumbar pack, small backpack, and I put a dove stool on there. The teeny tiny folding dove stool it's like the size of an umbrella by the time you collapse it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I'll take that and sit on that, and instead of trying to see the dogs and see the rabbit, if they're locked on, and I don't want to turn the rabbit and make it go in the hole, I'll just sit there on that dove stool and think, and then just listen to the hounds go round and round while I'm thinking.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. That's cool. Yeah, I'm still trying to kind of figure out how to spend my time while I'm waiting. I tend to get a little bit too jittery and I move around too much. So I end up losing a lot of opportunities for harvesting. That's not the whole reason I'm out there, but at the same time, having something to show for it occasionally, I appreciate that, especially when it's something that I can then turn around and make into good food for my family. Mm-hmm. but I'm kind of a fidgety guy out there. So I end up moving around and trying to get in front of them and stuff like that, rather than having the patience for them to come around. It's something that I've really been working on this year, because I can see that it's made my hounds a little bit clingy in the sense that they're not 100% sure if they start following their tracks back, they're not necessarily going to find me where they last saw me. And I can see that makes a couple of them a little bit nervous sometimes. So I'm trying to relax a little bit and trying to calm down. So it interests me to hear what people do while they're waiting. You know, some people just are on their phones, and I don't really want to do that either. I feel like too much of my focus the last 10 years has been on, you know, directed to things that somehow affect my life, maybe, you know, social media. But at the same time, I'd much rather be focused in on what's directly here in my house, in my, you know, my family and their physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual well-being, you know, rather than, as you say, reading the 80th argument over ammunition, or whether, you know, tall beagles or short beagles are the real quote unquote beagles, you know.
Right. There are certain bloodlines, or, you know, whatever.
Oh, sure.
And, you know, I know guys that never go rabbit hunting alone because I think it is too boring for them. And so they prefer going in a group, and then you get more shooters. You got more dogs to keep them going. You split up, and each chase ends a little faster because you got more potential of seeing the rabbit with more guys. And, you know, and they certainly, I know people who way prefer to condition dogs in the off season with somebody else so that you can sit and talk to each other while the dogs are running, because standing there for 3 hours by themselves just seems like torture, you know? You know, so yeah, I always say, you know, you kind of got to be comfortable in your own mind, you know, to,
sure, you
know, be able to. And it's the same thing with deer hunting. I know people that can't sit on a deer stand. I mean, they just get bored. It's like, I got to move, you know?
Yeah.
But,
yeah. No, that's the truth. So it seems like a just fantastic use of your time, just where you realistically probably shouldn't be doing anything else. You know, if you're on your phone or taking a nap, either way, you're not really there, but you can process and formulate without, you know, without checking out, you know, you're still present.
And I've always, you know, sermons aside and Bible studies, which I'll work on those while I'm out in the field too. I don't think I've ever made a big decision in my life without listening to beagles. And that, you know, just to like, you know, I come from absolute solid flower Christians. And what I mean by that is we went on Easter and saw all those lilies, and we went on Christmas Eve and saw all those poinsettias. And, well, hell, I might have thought there was that many flowers every Sunday, but no, they're just there. And so I remember when I was debating whether I really want to go to seminary. And I thought, well, that's going to seem so weird for my family because my relatives don't go at all or barely go. And I thought, I don't know if that. So I had to think long and hard about that. And I did that while listening to music, you know, the dogs singing to me. And I did the same thing when I decided to get married and propose to my wife. And, you know, just, you know, and even less important things like I had this Dodge Dakota that I couldn't stand in the snow, no matter what tires I had on it. And I thought, should I spend the money for something better? I'm like, I don't know. I better go run dogs and think about this.
Yep. Did you get something better?
Your
setup right now is pretty nice.
I have a 2010 Tacoma that I've had it for 10 years now.
Yep.
I bought it in 2013 used, or maybe it was 2011 or 12. It only had 30,000 miles on it when I bought it. Wow. I'm at 280,000 miles now.
Wow. Yeah, that's the ultimate beagling setup you've got there. I won't say I'm jealous, but it's I can appreciate what you got there.
And you could get the rooftop tent easier than I could. It's made in Italy for the Alps.
Is that right? Oh, really? I didn't realize
it's made in Italy as a 4-season tent in the Alps is what it's made for, that rooftop tent. Really? The company is Maggiolina. 2 G's.
Maggiolina. I'm going to have to actually write that down here so I don't forget it. Because that is, that's a sweet setup.
And it is a 4-season tent, but you better have a good sleeping bag in the winter.
Oh, I'll bet. Yeah.
Because it's not insulated, but you get a good zero sleeping bag. You know, I've been to, dog competitions where you wake up and it's 20 degrees or so in the morning. If you get there the night before, you get a good sleeping bag. It's comfortable, especially if you throw a beagle up there with you.
Sure. I can see Diamond being a fairly good sleeping bag warmer.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. She's always good about sticking her muzzle under my chin, so I keep my face out of the sleeping bag to breathe.
Yeah.
And then I got her on top of my neck to keep my face warm.
Cool. Gotcha. That's awesome. So what's next for you? Do you have any other? You just had the second Bramble Rambles, you said, or the geared a little bit towards Advent and things come out. What else are you working on these days? Or is it a spoiler alert sort of deal?
Yeah, I mean, I have enough things that I've posted on social media to get a Bramble Rambles Easter. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I'll get that assembled in time. You know, it's not too far away, so I probably won't get it out this year. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I've had in the queue with my publisher for a while now a 9th installment of Beagle Tales. So that might be coming out. Mm-hmm. You just never know when they're going to say you're up, and it's ready to proof. And other than that, I'll just keep on running dogs. And, I was just, getting ready. I looked at the calendar this year and there's the Christmas Eve is on a Sunday, which means you got to have morning and evening services. So I'm like, yeah, that's going to be, 6 services this year or something like that.
Wow. Yeah. Wow.
So
how long in advance do you write those?
What's that?
The services. Do you...
The sermon?
Yeah.
I start Sunday night.
Okay.
For
the following
the
week.
Next Sunday. The next Sunday. And I put probably a couple hours a day at least into them. And then I get done Sunday, take my Sunday afternoon nap, the only nap I take all week. And then when I wake up, supper time on Sunday, I pick the scripture for the next sermon on the following Sunday, and I send that text to our church parish secretary to put in the bulletin. And Sunday night, usually before I go to bed, I look over the scripture and, maybe get the Greek out and look at that a little bit before I go to bed. And then get serious about it on Monday morning. So I try to be done Friday night, so I kind of get a full day off Saturday from thinking, but I'm never happy with the sermon. I go to bed Saturday night not happy, and I'll, not sleep well. And then, even if it turns out to be okay, I just never am happy with it,
Right. Right. Well, it's,
and since COVID, all these sermons are online, so the whole world can see them. And it's like,
right.
Now I'm really self-conscious,
Right, right. Well, I mean, I think that it's better that than the alternative, being and being so sure in yourself that I think always striving for that perfection probably is reflected in the quality of your sermons, I should think.
Well, you can watch one and let me know. I can't stand to watch them and I'll try to listen to this podcast, and I know this isn't unique to me, but when I hear my voice, it's not what I think my voice sounds like, and that's true for everybody I know.
Isn't that the darndest thing? Isn't that the darndest thing? I feel the same way. In my head, I've got this deep voice, and then I'll listen to it on online, and I'm like, man, I've got this like New England whine to my voice that I really don't like. It's yeah. I think that's true for everybody, though, that nobody likes the sound of their own voice, or I guess some people do, but they're not usually people I've really liked to talk to. So, well, cool. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and talk with us. I'm psyched that you've still got that you're still getting out with the Beagles and still still writing. I've really enjoyed your books. It was definitely one of the things that influenced me. I grew up with a Beagle, but it definitely influenced me when I was trying to decide where do I go from here after a really brutal year that kind of left me reeling a little bit and kind of trying to figure out where do I go from here. And one of the things that I had taken sort of comfort and solace in throughout a rough year was, I read. It's a comfort thing for me. And I read, I was reading your books and made me kind of want to get, keep that kind of good vibe that was giving me going with a Beagle of my own when I suddenly found myself without a functioning dog on top of everything else. So I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate all the writing you've done and that you're still doing it. It's,
I'm glad it worked out. I've also had people say they brought a Beagle in the house because of me, and it was the worst decision they ever made.
Gotcha. Well, you're not exactly sugarcoating it either way in your writing. It's not like this fantasy, Disney version of what it's like to have a Beagle. There's references to begging and, food mysteriously disappearing and garbage being knocked over, yowling in the mornings, ruined family vehicles, etc., etc. So I think the people who got a Beagle and didn't know what they were getting into based on your books didn't read them very carefully.
Didn't read them very well. Yeah, a chair leg that, was responsible for a puppy getting their permanent teeth.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Well, good. Well, I really appreciate you coming on, Mr. Ford. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
And, good to talk to you. This way I don't have to pay for long distance to chat with you.
That's right. Yeah. Let's, if anything exciting happens or whenever you feel like it, let me know because I always love having you on.
All right, man. Good talking to you.
Likewise. We'll talk to you later.
We'll see you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Man, I love that sound.